Are you recording? My name is Amy, or Mrs. Gill. I work at CHS. I'm the history department chair, but I teach Get Focused, Stay Focused, which is our freshman transition elective, and economics. And I'll let Audrey introduce herself while we wait for more attendees.
Yeah, I'm Audrey Rogan. I teach science. We'll probably say that again when more people are here. Glad to have you. So while you're logging in, you all should be in our Google Classroom class titled Warrior Staff. We do have our first question on there. If you go to the Warrior Staff class, click on Classwork, there's a question, what are you hoping to get out of this Google Classroom training? If you could find that, that would be awesome, and just answer that as we're getting started.
Oh, Audrey, they added more features into the participant options. Did you see this?
No.
They have raise hand, yes, no, and then go slower, go faster.
Oh, great.
As option. And now they still have the thumbs up, thumbs down, the applause, and then need a break is a new option.
Oh, awesome.
And away. So you can ask yes or no questions or ask about pacing.
Sweet.
These are great.
Yeah, feel free to use those, everybody, and we'll try and see them.
I only have two. I just still have the thumbs up and the clapping.
I think
if you click on the participants tab.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
It should pop up with all the options.
All right, welcome. If you're just joining us, we have our first warm-up question. If you go to the Warrior Staff Google Classroom, we have our first question out under the Classwork tab. That question is, what are you hoping to get out of this Google Classroom PD? And do you have any specific questions before we get started? Thank you to B and Deborah and Janelle and Mary and Wes for already finishing that. If you have questions about how to find that question, you can either message us or just ask, and I can send you the link as well. Perfect. Awesome. Just waiting for a couple more of you to answer that question. Did anyone have trouble logging into our Warrior Staff Classroom?
I did.
Okay. And you got in okay though?
Well, after you sent me the link, I was, but when I tried to put in that code, it didn't. I tried 3 times.
Oh, really? Maybe it was that first, like, there was an L at the beginning that looked kind of like an I or
okay, I think I thought it was number 1, 3.
Perfect.
There we go.
Awesome. All right. Perfect. Awesome. All right, well, we will get started. If you still haven't answered that question, feel free to answer it anytime during our presentation, during our lesson, so that we can make sure that all of your questions get answered. I'm Audrey Rogan. I'm a science teacher at Carpinteria High School, and I'll let my co-teacher Amy introduce herself.
I'm Amy Gill. I teach Get Focused, Stay Focused, which is our freshman transition course, and economics. And both myself and Audrey will be co-teaching this while Audrey is presenting. I'm going to be managing the chat feed. So if you have any questions as you think of them, feel free to type them up in that chat, and I'm going to be keeping track of them so that when we end sort of the basics section of our training, we can answer all those questions, and then we'll start fresh before we start sort of some of the more in-depth stuff during session number 2. So as you think of questions, feel free to put them in that chat, and I will be keeping track of them so we can answer them all at the end.
Perfect, thanks. So here are the basics of what we're going to cover today, and I know we're all at different levels here. Some of us have never taught with Google Classroom before, and then others are just looking for a couple more things to make Google Classroom easier as we transition to distance learning. So we kind of have 2 levels we'll cover today. Level 1, I'll just go over some big common features, especially if you're looking at that home screen, just to kind of talk about what you're looking at, the big tools to use to get started. And then under the Classwork tab, there's kind of some different categories of things you can post. And then Amy will take us through level 2, some of the features that you might not have seen before, because a lot of them are brand new, like using rubrics, setting up your Google Classroom the way that we want to do it in CHS style, and just kind of some features that you might not be familiar with. At the end of our presentation, we'll ask you whether you want more help with these level 1 type questions or level 2, and we'll split us off into a breakout room, and Amy and I will both answer your questions about those different levels. And so again, like Amy said, if at any time you have a question, just pop it in the chat. Whoever's not presenting will kind of be monitoring that, and we'll get started. So I'll take us to our Warrior Staff class. And if you're from the middle school, welcome. We're so glad you're here. I will just delete you from this, our Warrior Staff class, so that you don't feel like you're getting all of the notifications from the high school. But today we wanted to make sure that everyone has access to the classroom that we're going to be using as staff. And I'll actually just go back to our homepage really quick. So when you sign on to Google Classroom, this is what you'll see. You'll see kind of all the classes that you're a student in. You'll also see all the classes that you are an educator in. And one of the big ways to tell the difference, obviously you should know what classes you're teaching, but if you also want like students to be aware of you know, how to kind of check and see what classes they're in, this little person indicates that you're a student in that class. So I'm a student in Ms. Gill's ethnic studies class. We've been practicing Google Classroom, so that's why I'm a student. But all these other courses I'm a teacher in. If you want to make a class, you can click this plus sign, and that will let you either join or create a class. So when you're setting up your classrooms, you're going to click on this to kind of get that started. And then if you haven't joined our Warrior Staff class, you'll click on this and then you'll put in the code. And so we'll get started with.
Audrey, do you want to click on it just to show them what features pop up when you do that? Because I know we have a couple people in that have never created a Google Classroom.
Perfect. So thank you for that. So join class. This is what your students will see when they're joining your class. There should be a class code. I'll show you how to post that class code in a minute. But then all they have to do is enter that class code, and then they're a student. If you are making a class, you'll have your class name, you'll have the section, maybe that's where you put period 1, period 2, what subject it is. And when you put science or math or English, sometimes they'll auto give you a theme, which is kind of nice. You get like a little picture of like a hand doing math, or, you know, a book in English. So you can kind of, you know, label that subject, and then your room number. Obviously here it's not as important because we're distance learning, but you can still put your room number in for when we go back to in-person learning. And so that's all it takes to create a class. It's really straightforward. And that's all we did to make our classes. So we'll jump into the Warrior
Will
Staff.
You do me a favor?
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Oh, yeah.
Can you change the chat? Can you change the chat settings so that everybody can see it?
Yes.
You still have it on your student settings from teaching, where they can chat with you privately.
Perfect. Do we want everyone publicly?
Sure.
Okay.
So that everyone can see questions and respond.
Yep.
Okay,
so this
thanks.
is our, great. This is our homepage. Google Classroom used to only have this stream feature, and it's been really nice that they've kind of separated that into the stream which is really used for announcements, any quick reminders for students, and then this Classwork tab, and that takes them to anything they need to turn in for your class. You should be monitoring under the Classwork page. So stream, Classwork, people and grades, and then this, if you have a new student, this is where the class code is. And if you haven't actually joined our Warrior staff, here's the code. You can type that in really quick, or Amy can push that out in our chat. And so any new students that come to your class who might not automatically be enrolled, you can just give them this link, and that will get them in. This meeting link, we're not really using Google Meets as a form of virtual teaching. And so we're not going to talk about it too much because we're using Zoom, but that option is there for you if you need it. So the big kind of thing we'll be focusing on in this training is the Classwork tab. So you can see that we've already organized everything for this PD under this topic, getting the most out of Google Classroom. But Mandy and other leaders on this kind of tab have been making, miscellaneous helpful items, distant learning documents, but we're just going to focus on this topic for today. You can also see that all of your topics show up here on the left, just in case you're like, oh shoot, I had a unit from like forever ago. You can just click on it. It's like a table of contents. And your students can see all this, which is really nice. So you both are looking at kind of the same thing. We'll talk more about different assignments that you can create using this Create tab. The People tab is fabulous for kind of organizing who you want in your classroom. If you're a department chair, it's really nice to make a department Google Classroom. If you have any shared documents, instead of adding your co-teachers as students, which doesn't let them post anything, it's really nice to just add them as teachers. And so you can have like your department chair can set this up, or if you're not in a department chair and you guys talk about it, you can just make a really nice Google Classroom to like throw all of your science documents or throw all of your English documents, but just make sure that you add everyone as a teacher instead. And that adding process is really easy. You literally just type their email, just like I did for you. They get an email and then they're in. But the cool thing about the Students tab is I can use this page to email students. I can invite their guardians from this page. And I can just kind of monitor who's in my class. If someone leaves your classroom, you can, let's say April moved away. So sad, we're going to miss her, but I don't want her getting all of these notifications, so I'm going to remove her. So all of that can be monitored under your People's tab. The Grade tab is also nice to just kind of see if people are turning things in, if they're getting their stuff done. We use Aries for most of our grades, so I don't spend a lot of time here, but it is kind of nice if you want to know what they're doing specifically on Google Classroom. So those are our 4 main tabs, and then obviously we've got our settings that you can kind of, adjust your class depending on what's going on, grading, and all of that. So those are kind of the basic features of what you're looking at. Again, quick announcements are going to go in the stream, more work-related items, materials, all of your unit things. You're going to be using this Classwork tab. Amy, are there any questions that are coming in that you think, sorry, let me unmute you.
I just wanted to go over a couple, which are really good questions. Ramsey asked if it's best to create different class periods for each of your classes, even if it's the same class. And I would say yes. And I will show you in our level 2 how to assign the same assignment to multiple periods. But I would suggest keeping the periods separate because one, you don't know, some of those classes you'll have on, say, a Monday or a Tuesday, depending on what the schedule is like. And you may not want that assignment to go out on that day versus the next day. And also there's some things that maybe one class is ahead and one class is behind. It's nice to be able to sort of separate those classes and posting times. And then Elise and Pat both kind of, and Beatrice addressed the link with Aries. So if you link your Google Classroom with your Aries account, which I can't show, unfortunately, because our classes are not populated yet, but you can link your Google Classrooms with your Aries accounts, and then we'll auto add students when they're added to your roster. And you won't have to use the link code that Audrey demonstrated. But there's multiple ways to add. The easiest I find is waiting until your Aries rosters are populated and adding all the students at the same time. But if that is not an option, or you find that one of your students got accidentally kicked out, the easiest way to add them back in is with that the add code. And then the other question was with grading. I will show you where the transferring grades from Aries should be, but like I said, our rosters aren't populated yet, so it won't show up. But I can show you where you would find it to be able to import scores from Google. And it's really easy if you're grading things in Google Classroom, very easy to push those things to Aries and be able to transfer your grades rather than having to enter them twice. So all of those things we'll go over. And then as in terms of notifications for students, I can understand there was a question about it being overwhelming with the amount of notifications that are coming through. One of the things that we talked about at the high school is creating that single agenda slide at the beginning of the week. And I think that's going to help sort of mitigate some of that overload of notifications, and that you post at the beginning of the week what the plan is for the week. That way they're not getting as many like day of notifications of like what we're doing. Those things will already have been posted at the beginning of the week. And then if something changes, then you would add something new. But I think the point of that agenda slide that we talked about at the high school level, which we are more than happy to share that idea with the middle school, of posting that agenda slide at the beginning of the week, so that it mitigates that overload of notifications, because it can definitely be overwhelming if they have 6 periods that are all posting things to their Google Classrooms. And I think that is all the questions that came through on that session. Are there any more questions? Does anyone have a question that they've thought of since?
Perfect.
Yeah, I've always like wished that I could just post like a folder with like the syllabus, and then a folder with like all the chapter 1 assignments. Like, so if kids need to go back and get something, is there any way to do that, or they just have to scroll through the classwork and find it?
When I do that, I just sort it all through these topics. So let's say there's like unit 1, I have a bunch of assignments that I gave them, and I have their reading. Amy's going to show you later how to make assignments versus material. I would post that under the materials tab. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, so it would just be all in the classwork area. They would just scroll through and find old assignments. So
Yeah, and hopefully it's like, it's, pretty organized. You've got unit 1, unit 2, unit 3, to where they don't, it's not like scroll. It does get pretty organized, especially when you number your assignments. I started doing it at the end of the year, and it was like night and day helpful, especially if there's things that you want them to be doing in order. So yeah, it's just kind of going to be managing that organization.
And the other thing you can do, Ramsey, is post it as a material, but post the link to the shared file from your Google Drive. So if you put all of those materials in a shared file from Google Drive, you can then just copy and paste the link to that Google folder into the materials in your Google Classroom. So say you want to put your syllabus, your class expectations, like all of that sort of stuff together in one folder called like intro materials. You can put that in a shared folder called intro materials, and then post the link to that shared folder under one material so that they're all together.
Perfect. So we'll just like kind of go back to the basics. We'll answer, I think as we continue, like maybe more of the questions will be answered, and then obviously we'll have time at the end. So when you're making assignments, or you're posting materials, or you're doing anything that you want your students to actually do or turn in or to see, you're going to be using this create button. And I'm going to show you the question tab and the quiz assignment tab, and then Amy will bring you through the rest of them. This question tab was how we started class. So when class started, I had posted this, what are you hoping to get out of Google Classroom? I can see 12 of you did it, 12 of you didn't. Totally fine. If you are really wanting your students to answer it, you can click on see who hasn't done it yet, send them a quick email, right? For something like this, I wouldn't send them an email, but if it's a big assignment, it's really nice. You can just select all that haven't turned it in, write them an email. Hi, I see you haven't turned this in, and it will link them directly to their assignment. Or I can, from here make comments and look at all of their answers. Even here, I can see just at one glance what everyone's saying, kind of what's going on, look at all your answers, and then I can grade them really fast. So that's the question tab. They also have, if you want to do a multiple choice question in that, I'll just make a quick question so you can see what that looks like. You can choose multiple choice, and that gives you some really nice data for if you want to see if kids are ready to move on or voting on something. Multiple choice, it all shows up, it stacks the responses so you can see what the most common answer was. So that's that question feature. Really nice to get kids started. Really nice to see at a glance who's doing their work. The other tab that I use all the time is the quiz assignment tab. We do this for science kind of all the time for weekly quizzes, and I use their unit tests with Google Forms. I've already made this assignment so that I didn't have to make it all in front of you. But basically, I'll give you this quiz, and I actually would like you to take it. It's just about a basics Google Classroom, pretty much everything we just talked about. There's 5 questions, but I do want you to take it so you can see what it's like to take a Google Forms quiz using Google Classroom. So here is the quiz. You can add a new quiz at any time using your Google Drive. So this is exactly how I did it. Super easy. I made the quiz. It'll pop up on my recents. There it is. Insert, boom, quiz is linked. It's ready to go. I can set my points value. And then one thing I really want to make sure, if you want to get scores, click grade importing. And that will pull all of their scores from this form and put it onto Google Classroom. And then from there, you can import into Aries, which Amy will kind of show you more about. So I'm going to assign this to you. Here you go. I'll also give you a little link to this assignment just in case you haven't been able to get onto our Google Classroom. We'll click copy link. I'll put this in the chat. All right, so if you can, everybody go take that quiz. If you're
as you guys get that pulled up, I just want to address some of the other things that have been pasted in the chat since then. Elise brought up a good point about reminding our students that they don't answer a question in the comment section, that they actually click on the question and answer it in their response. And that's a common mistake that a lot of students make. So going over that before you assign a question. And then Pat brought up the question again about sort of being notified. When you're grading assignments, students will be notified once an assignment is returned, not as you're grading them. So if you're working through grading, say a question or an assignment, it won't notify students unless you click that return button. You can return as you're grading, or you can wait and click through and grade the entire assignment and then return the entire assignment to everybody all at the same time. In order to load grades into Aries, the assignment has to be returned to students. It won't load a score unless you've graded it and returned it. So that's another thing. And they will get a notification, depending on what their Google Classroom notifications are. They'll get an email notification when an assignment has been returned. So they'll know, right, if I've graded an assignment and it's all returned, it'll say, Mrs. Gill has returned the success project assignment. Go check your grade, and it'll show up with their score or that it was returned and it wasn't turned in. So it's a good way to kind of like flag your students' attention if they haven't turned something in, because it will say an assignment has been graded, but they won't get a score if they didn't turn it in.
awesome. So I'll just give you 2 or 3 minutes to take this quiz. If you need help finding it on Google Classroom, just let me know. Again, it's just under that Classwork tab.
Is there a way to minimize the windows in Classwork? So like we're kind of done with that opening question, but it still kind of takes a lot of real estate. Is there a way to make that a smaller chunk of the screen?
Aside from just like just dragging and shrinking the screen, Are you like talking about it like showing up on your monitor?
Like when you're looking at your feed, like when you're looking at all of these things, it can it looks like it might be a little overwhelming. You start having like a lot of classwork. Is there a way to make it so you can just see the title and then expand it if they just wanted to see that certain thing versus all of the like the comments and like the answers that are already for old stuff?
It should just list like this. Go ahead, Amy.
If you've clicked on it, it
Oh,
will
okay.
expand. If you unclick it, it will
Yep.
collapse.
Gotcha.
Yeah, there we go.
And I'm going to go over some of, while you guys are taking that little quiz, I'm going to look over some of our responses of what we're hoping to get out of this and just make sure that we're hitting all of those points as we make our way kind of towards the more advanced skills. And then a lot of people I feel are looking just of ways to enhance or up their Google Classroom like proficiency or use. And then I also see that there's a couple people that we have never, like our new hires have never used Google Classroom. So this entry level stuff is great. And then something new, I mean, Audrey and she demonstrated quizzes. If you haven't done that, we're gonna demonstrate ways to incorporate other tools like an ed puzzle. We're gonna go over some new ways to grade with rubrics. And if there's any like ideas that you have or any like, how would I do this? Feel free to ask those questions. Like if you have creative ideas, but you just don't know how to implement them using Google Classroom, just feel free to ask. This is a great way to brainstorm and make sure that we're putting all of our heads together to best use this tool. I find that I use questions a lot to start off my class. As we know, taking attendance in Zoom is a lot more difficult than taking attendance in a classroom where I have a seating chart and it's really easy to figure out which kid is absent. So usually attendance will take me about 2 to 3 minutes to kind of get attendance taken. And when I do that, I'll usually assign a question for the students to be working on kind of as a do now or a starter. So the questions feature is a great way to do that. You can also assign them a video to watch while you take attendance, like a short little snippet. That's another idea of things that you can do to sort of get that class started so that you can take care of the logistical teacher stuff that you need to do that we're getting used to that takes us a little bit more time on Zoom. So those are some suggestions with like the easy features that we have gone over, and then we'll kind of dive into a little bit more of the advanced skills here in a minute.
Perfect. So it's looking like most of us have turned in this quiz. And again, Google Classroom makes it really easy to see who's done it and who hasn't. So I'm just going to go over those answers really quick so we have time at the end for question and answers. So from the teacher perspective, I've got this. I don't need to take the quiz. So I'm going to go down to the bottom right and click edit. And we'll look at our responses and kind of see if there's anything that is really obvious we need to kind of double check and reteach maybe. So from this responses tab, I can see how our students did, how you did. Looks like we're doing pretty good. Maybe a couple of us missed some things. And then of course I can go back if someone missed everything, I can go back and check in with them and make sure they're all right. So this is a great way to, I do this all the time. I pull up a test and I show the kids what was commonly missed. Notice there are no names here. And so makes it really easy to like give some feedback to a whole class with this data. So yes, if you want to make an announcement, the stream is the best way to do that. You don't want to be cluttering up the Classwork page with like quick, bring this to class or, don't forget to turn this in. That is the stream. If you want to post an assignment for your students, B was over the Classwork button, and looks like a lot of us got that. Which of the following is not a category, something you can quickly create in the Classworks page. You cannot generate a list of students missing assignments, but you can post questions, quizzes, assignments, materials, but you can't check their grades through that tab. All of these are great ways to start class quickly with a warm-up. As you could see, this Google Forms is a really quick little quiz. You can use this as a pop quiz. You can use this as a check-in. How are you doing? Rate 1 to 5. How are you feeling? Kind of whatever you want to use that for. It's really, really fast. So you can make a Google Forms. You can post a question. We saw that. That was really fast. And then you can also post a question on the stream and have students comment their answers. Obviously, they can all see those comments, and so you just want to be aware of what you're posting. If it's really personal, you might want to hide those responses and do it more towards a question. And then if you want to show a student how they're doing, you can click on the grading tab. So that is a Google Forms through Google Classroom. Really easy. The other cool thing about this is when it's done, I can view assignment. And then I can import grades. And once I import them, all of these green scores will fill up, and then I can import them in Google Classroom once I've graded them. So I'll just import grades. No judgment here if you got a bad score on this. It's totally fine. I think most of us did great, but I do want to show you how this works. So there we go. I can click turn in, and I can return to you. And I'll just do this so you can see what that email looks like. Those 19 students who finished it will be notified, and they can go back and check their score. Pretty straightforward. Again, it's like very minimum clicks and all of that, and it uploads seamlessly into Aries. I can make a whole video on how to do that once we actually get our gradebooks onto Aries. So with that, I will turn it over to Amy to move us on to level 2. So I'm going to stop sharing here. Perfect. You're muted, Amy, sorry.
Unmute. All right, there we go. So we are going to start sort of our level 2 skills with how I would create an assignment, assign it to multiple class periods, create a rubric for that assignment, schedule it if I didn't want it to go out right away. So let me start with us in our Warrior Staff classroom. And I'm going to go to the Classwork tab because Audrey and I loaded these. We created an Edpuzzle in the Edpuzzle app, which Edpuzzle, if you haven't used it, is a great tool for remote learning. It allows you to either upload a video. Most videos on YouTube will be available for you to upload. Or there's also videos that have already been pre-uploaded by other instructors, and the Edpuzzle has already been created for them. But it allows you to upload that video, add questions to that video, and track your students' progress with watching it, and they're not allowed to fast forward, and they have to answer the questions as the video plays. So it's a great way to kind of remotely monitor their progress through a video content lesson or snippet that you wanted to add to them. So we saved this as a draft. I created a Edpuzzle video on the basics of Google Classroom for our asynchronous students, but you'll be able to see it. So if I wanted to create this as an assignment, if I was creating this from the beginning, let's go back to that. I would click here and say create an assignment, and then a template that looks like this would pop up. And I would enter in the title of my assignment. I'd enter in any instructions that I want the student to be aware of. And then I would add any links or resources that I would need to add to this assignment. And if I click add here, it's going to give me multiple options. I can either add a resource from my Google Drive. So if I made it in any of the Google Suite apps, it will usually be under my recently created items. I could add a link to a video, a link to an article, a link to a website, whatever it corresponds with my lesson. I can add a file from my computer, or I could directly link a YouTube video right here to whatever assignment or lesson that I'm making. And this one is nice because you don't have to go to YouTube on a separate tab. You can just select this one, search whatever video you want. So say I was in Crash Course Economics for my Crash Course or my economics class. I can type in Crash Course Economics and click search, and it will pop up any videos on YouTube that match that topic, and I can select whichever one I want. And then I don't have to copy the link. I don't have to go to YouTube on a separate page. And the feature for Drive looks the same. It'll open up my recent things in my Google Drive, and I can select whatever recent file I created to add to my assignment. And then files from your computer or links that you want to add. And they will, the interesting thing about creating an assignment is as they populate the files here, it'll populate it in order that you loaded it. So if you want it in a specific order, just make sure that you load them in that order. So if you want, say, the assignment materials first, but then the video link underneath, and then a link to an article, just make sure you load them in the order that you want them. Because once they're up there, they go in order that you loaded. And then I can say what class I want them to go to. So this answers Ramsey's question earlier about whether you want it as separate classes or as the same class if it's the same subject. So for example, I usually have 3 periods of Get Focused. So when I create it, I usually always create it in my period 2 Get Focused because that's my first class that I have. And then I'll go over here and select period 3 Get Focused and period 4 Get Focused because I want all 3 of the classes to have the same material. So whatever class I want to post it to, I'm going to add a check, right? I'm not going to do that right now because all I want it to go is to Warrior Staff. And then next to here, it will have the option for all students. You can either assign it to all the students in that classroom, or if it's like an extension activity because a student ended early, you can just assign it to specific students as they end an assignment early. If you are a points system grader, you can add the points here, or you can say that it's an ungraded assignment, that you just want them to complete it and turn it in. And then you can set the due date for either that day or the day after, or however long in advance that you want it. And then right here, which is one of the new features of Google Classroom, and I will tell you, if you're looking to expedite your grading, which I have found that the grading with being remote has been tenfold, I feel like, what it was in the classroom, because for the most part in the classroom, we can do formative assessment by just walking around and circulating the classroom and going up and down the aisles. And I find that everything now has to be verbal and written out, verbal or written out. And doing that has become a little bit more work heavy on the load. So I will say adding a rubric has been a great way to kind of cut that down. I used it to grade my economics finals at the end of the semester, and they had 21 questions as part of their final, and it maybe took me about 5 minutes a student using the rubrics, where if I didn't have the rubrics, it would have taken me probably 30 to 40 minutes a student to grade their finals. And then I'll show you that feature, but if I don't want to assign this assignment right away, if you click this extra drop-down menu arrow, you can say schedule, and you can select a date and a time for this assignment to go out. The only problem is you cannot schedule for multiple periods. So you would have to go, which I'll show you how to reuse a post. You'd have to say reuse a post and then schedule it for each individual class. I'm hoping that's a feature that Google Classroom will change soon. But until then, you have to schedule each individual class separately. So if you decided to use the rubric grading here, you can either create a rubric or reuse a rubric. I'll show you the create feature first, and then I'll show you how to reuse one. So if I was going to create a rubric for this, and maybe my first criteria is video viewing. So this is completion. And I'm just going to make that 1 point, that they finished the video, and I can add the level and the title here, and I'm going to say this is worth one point. So I might say something like, you completed the viewing of the Google Classroom basics. And then if I want to add a second one, I can add a second criteria, and maybe this is accuracy. And this is number or questions answered correctly. And maybe I know that there's 3 questions in this video, so I'm going to make this one 3 points. I can add a description or a level title. And then when I'm done with that, I can click save. So you'll see up here, it has put my point total at 4 because this first content of them completing it was worth 1, and then down here was worth 3. And I click save. And it will now upload that rubric right here. And I can grade it for each student as I assign it. If I wanted to reuse one, so I delete this one. Like say I have a standards-based rubric, which is what I usually use. I can say reuse rubric. I've got to go find the class that I have that rubric in. So for this, I'm going to use my sample class of my ethnic studies pilot that I created. And I might want to use the rubric from my essential question number 1. And let's say preview just so I can make sure that it's what I wanted. So I just created a rubric that said above standard, standard met, approaching standard, below standard, and no attempt, right? And I numbered them accordingly. And I can reuse this one. So I'll say select. And it'll populate my rubric right here. 4 points, it's the first criteria. So I will highly, and let me assign this so that you guys can see it. But I highly suggest, let me change this to 4. I highly suggest using the rubrics option because if you take a look at the assignment, when I go to grade it, it's really nice to be able to see the rubric and as a student to be able to see the rubric of what it is that you're working on. So that's how to assign to multiple periods, how to schedule an assignment, and how to use or create a rubric. And then as a student, Audrey told you at the beginning of easy ways to notice whether you're a student in a class or a teacher. So I'm a student in Audrey's test class here. You saw that she had this logo on her ethnic studies class because she was the student in my ethnic studies pilot. You can also click on this 3-line menu right here, and this is a super helpful feature for teachers and for students. So if you click at the to review, you'll see up here it says teaching. If I click on to review, it'll populate all of the things that are in all of my Google Classrooms that I need to grade. So Pat asked the question of, it seems like it's really overwhelming to stay on top of everything that's been turned in and everything that you need to grade. You'll see here that these are ones that are in progress that I've already looked at. These ones have no due date. So I can click on these and turn them in or grade them or whatever I need to do. But this is helpful to stay on top of that grading workload because you'll be able to populate everything from all of your classes. If I'm a student, there's a very similar one for our students that will be helpful for them staying on top of their work. And it's down here under enrolled, and they'll click on what's called their to-do list. And under their to-do list, it will tell them what's due tomorrow, what's due the next day, what has no due date or whatever, so that they can stay on top of theirs. So I will say these 2 features are super helpful for managing the workload of all of your classes that you need to grade and all of the students' classes that they're enrolled in. So again, that's over here in the 3-bar menu, and it's under to review for teachers and then to-do list for students. And then checking your calendar. So if you go into your Google Calendar, that's not what I wanted, whoops, Google Calendar. It will give you the option to, it'll automatically turn on your Google Classroom calendars to your Google Calendar. But if you click over here on My Calendars, it will show you, whoops. It'll show you all of your calendars over here. You can turn them on or off depending on what you want, but it'll load your Google Calendars. So as you post things, like the assignments that got posted, it'll show up here. Basic Google Classroom competency check. This is for the people that are going to take this class asynchronously. Edpuzzle is posted here as well. So our students can manage it from to-do, but they can also manage it from their calendar. And you as a teacher can see all the due dates together on your Google Calendar as long as you've got that Google Classroom calendar turned on. And then in terms of if you have multiple periods of the same class, like say you have 3 math 2 classes, you can just, but you know you're going to post the same thing to every class, you can just turn on one of those calendars so that you don't have the assignment listed there multiple times. So that's a way to manage the calendar overload. And then how to post a material. So we went over assignments. Here is how to post a material. So let's go to my Warrior staff. Audrey, is there, before I go on to the next option, are there any questions that would be good to address?
We just have one. There was actually one really great question about whether you can weight assignments through Google Classroom. And I was looking at grades and couldn't find it, but if you actually go to your class settings, there's an option to weight different assignments. Way at the bottom, if you go to grades, you can change that grade calculation.
Okay.
We use Aries for like sending out their grades, and so you know, you can turn that on if you really want them to understand that it's a big, heavy assignment, or you can just rely on Aries to do that. And then Pat said, does it auto-populate the calendar when they put, like when you post an assignment, it does auto-populate students' calendars. So they can look, if they wanted, to look at either month by month or week by week and see all of those assignments that they have to do. It's just another way of viewing all of their assignments. The to-do list does a really good job of that, and then the calendar does a really good job of that.
And one of the things that we're really trying to emphasize amongst our staff and amongst our students is the capability of all of the Google Suite options, including like the, especially since we're remote, right? We're relying heavily on technology. If we can teach, I mean, one, we've got to teach ourselves first, but if we can then teach our students how to navigate digital tools like that to-do list and like Google Calendar, these are skills that they're going to carry with them into the workforce in the future. So it's important to kind of maybe every once in a while have them reference their calendar or have them reference their to-do list while they're in class with you, just so that they get in the habit of looking at those things. Our next option is how to post a material. So if I was on here, I would select materials. This is something, if you just want kids to have access to it, but they don't need to turn anything in, they don't need to answer any questions, you just want to post like a reading or a PDF or a video, right, that they don't have any questions to go with, that would be a material. Same options, you'll have Google Drive link file or YouTube. And you'll see that the grading has disappeared over here because the material is not graded. It's just a material. We preloaded our material, which is a tips and tricks and a PowerPoint that I put together that you guys are welcome to use. I'm going to be giving it to all of my freshmen, but I created a PowerPoint presentation on how to be a successful distance learner. Anyone who has access to this material when I post it, you guys will have the link to it. You are welcome to use it in your classes. I would just talk amongst your staff and see which like department is going to talk about it so that they're not getting the same presentation in all 6 of their periods. And then Audrey also put together 12 Google Classroom strategies. So I'm going to post this material. So I would go to edit because I saved it. I would make sure that it's going to the classes that I want. If I wanted it to go to multiple classes, I'd select it over here, but I just want it to go to you guys and to all students. And I can select the topic. So you'll see the Google Slides here and then the article that Audrey added. And then I would click post because I want it to go out to you guys now. If I didn't want it to go out until tomorrow, I can select that schedule option. And then I click post. And it'll ask me, are you sure you want to post? And then you'd say yes, and it'll post in their classwork, and it'll also show up as the most recent thing in a student's stream. Now that we've kind of gone over like how to do a quiz, how to do a question, an assignment, and a material, one of the big questions was how to transfer those grades then over to Aries. So I created my grade books. I don't have any students in them yet, but this is my Get Focused fall class for 2020-2021. You'll notice there are no students in there, so I can't see it. But when I'm on an assignment, say I want them to read over the syllabus and then in the comments section type their name as their like digital signature. That's what I'm planning on having them do. So this would be my syllabus signature assignment. So I would go to Aries, or not Aries, I would go to Google Classroom. I'd find my assignment. So maybe it was my syllabus that I put in there. I'd make sure I've graded it all and make sure that I returned it. And then I would go here to the assignment that I want to load my Google Classroom assignment to. when I click show more, when I'm under the enter scores tab, up underneath here, it will pop up with options like I'm sure you've used the mass edit scores or mass add scores. It'll be one of those similar gray buttons that pops up here. It won't populate right now because I don't have any students, but it will say import from Google Classroom. And I can select import from Google Classroom. It'll then pop up with all of my Google classes that are linked to my Aries account. I'll select which class I want to import, which assignment, and then it will automatically push those grades from Google Classroom to my Aries gradebook. So you only need to grade it once. If you can grade it in Google Classroom, you can push everything to Aries. And then the students will have access. Sometimes our students, they still have difficulty navigating their Aries workbook or their Aries gradebooks. They still have access to their grades on Google, and those grades on Google will then match whatever you've pushed over to Aries. So again, you'd go to that assignment, you'd open up the show more menu, and then those buttons will pop up right here. You'll select the import from Google. It's usually the one farthest to the left. That's why I'm circling over here. And then it'll pop up with the menu to select your class and select the assignment. And then once your class is selected, it won't make you select the class again. So after I've already linked Get Focus Period 2 with the Get Focus Period 2 gradebook, from now on, I'll just select whatever assignment it is that I want to populate. And we are close to getting over our time here. We're getting about 10 minutes left, and I want to make sure that we have time for breakout rooms and questions. Did I cover everything, Audrey?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. And one of the other things, just one more thing that I have on my list, reusing a post. If you've already posted it in another class and you want to reuse it, you go to Classwork here, and then under the create, you can say reuse the post, and you can go to whatever class you posted that assignment in, and all your classes will populate right here. It's taken my internet a second. So you don't have to recreate the assignment every time. And this is helpful if you've used Google Classrooms in the past. You can always go back to a previous year and reuse the posts from the previous year. So it's almost as if you've set up your Google Classrooms before, you can reuse those classrooms the next year, or those assignments the next year. I don't know why it's not loading. My internet's going pretty slow, but that's the option, reuse post. And then we at the high school have decided that we're going to kind of try and organize our Google Classrooms by weeks. And I created a Google Classroom for all of our teachers that I shared with them that has the kind of topics already created. And the reason we decided to organize it by weeks is just because, I mean, we know now we're not going back until at least November 1st, and if that early. So one of the things that we felt like was the easiest if we were going to be transitioning in and out of remote to hybrid to in-person this year, that it would be easiest to organize our information and materials by weeks. If you folks at the middle school would like to be added to this classroom so that you can copy it, just either shoot me an email or make a comment in the Warrior staff. Oh, actually, I can just have you add the code. If you want to copy down the code for this class, you can be added. Actually, that'll add you as a student. Never mind. Email me, agill@cusd.net, and I will add you to this classroom, and you can duplicate it. So you don't have to recreate it yourself. All of those weeks will already be created for you. And with that said, that leads into duplicating a class. So say I have 2 periods of economics, and I only want to create the classroom once. Once I've completely created my economics classroom, if you click the 3 buttons over here, I can say copy, and it will duplicate the entire class. And then I can just rename my copy period 5 and one period 6. So if you have multiple preps or multiple classes, multiple periods of the same thing, the easiest way is to just get yourself set up initially and then copy the class. That was a lot of information. I'm going to stop sharing, and then let's get to questions so that we can make sure that everybody's got all the tools that they need to be successful.